Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, it's a great pleasure for me to contribute to this important event today. I will speak about the success of the Serbian law on dual education and its implementation. Do you know how this project started? Let's hear how the initiator himself argues.
It gives me a pleasure to address as the President of the Republic of Serbia, who wants to economically strengthen his country and enable young people to build their careers and future in it. Wise Erasmus of Rotterdam has noticed a long time ago that the main hope of a nation lies in the proper education of its youth. It is a fact that precisely the most developed countries of the world are led by this proverb of his, and Serbia is getting closer to them by taking fast and big steps. While I stayed at Winterthur, I realized the potential of dual vocational education and made a decision then to enable such an education model for young people who get their education in Serbia. As we economically developed our country from scratch in times of modern technological challenges, we realized that dual vocational education is the pillar of the respective economic development. Success of this education system is best demonstrated by economies of the countries that have been using it longest. It is about leading economies such as Switzerland, Germany, Austria, and Denmark. On that occasion, I asked Professor Ursula Reinhold to help us in creating such a model in Serbia as well.
Indeed, Serbia has a challenge to catch up with leading countries mentioned by Mr. Vučić. I prepared for you a slide with the youth labor market outcomes of the four countries, Denmark, Austria, Germany, and Switzerland, and compare it with Serbia. And as you can see, Serbia has catched up in the time from 2009 to 2019. However, it's far away compared to these leading countries like Switzerland and Germany, Denmark, and Austria. So the question is therefore, how can this be done? And there, I would say it was a very wise decision of the president to start establishing a dual education system. This is a very complex re-engineering project, and it takes at least a generation. Why is it so complex? I will explain you later on, and also where we are actually. So the process even started before President Vučić has attended the conference in Winterthur in 2016. It was basically the German and Austrian donor partners with their institution who did launch several pilot projects on dual education. And that was very helpful for us and for Serbia to develop this initiative in the specific Serbian way. In 2016, after the conference, the president asked me whether I can support him on this way forward, and he invited me for a workshop in Belgrade. After that workshop, the CCIS decided to make a first analysis of the draft of the law on dual education, which for me, it was a difficult draft because I could see that it's very difficult to implement such a law with all the stakeholders, as it has major problems in it, which especially, I will explain you later, has to do with how companies are involved. So we could invite Serbian teams to the summits to explain them the evidence, what matters with regard to a robust dual education system. And after the first team has attended this summits, they start to realize why this law will not work. And it was a good coincidence that it was on the same time as the draft was on the way to the parliament. And thanks to the Prime Minister Ana Brnabić, we could at least include a transitional article saying that in the next 3 years we will evaluate what works and what doesn't work, so that we can revise the law in order that it works really well afterwards. Then we had this phase one. I will come back to that later on. Actually, we are in 2022. We will have a meeting with the president soon, and afterwards, hopefully, we start with the phase two. But let's speak now some photos, because it was also a really emotional process. And I can tell you that Serbian stakeholders were so active in this process. You see here some pictures from the big ceremony after the approval of the law on dual education in the parliament, an event where stakeholders from whole Serbia were invited to the parliament. And here you have speakers such as the Minister of Education, the Assistant Minister, Gabriela Grujic, then also the President of the Chamber of Commerce, Marko Čadež, as well as myself. I could address a speech to the audience. And it was a really very nice and emotional event, a good starting point for the implementation process. What have we done during the implementation? Well, our activities supported by the Swiss government were basically research and counseling. While the stakeholders in Serbia did implement the law, and the implementation means creating rule books, preparation of all the material, roadshows, campaign, media, new occupational profile, certification of companies, and so on. We helped them to measure what works and what doesn't work with 4 surveys on implementation research and a cost-benefit analysis. And again, let's show some pictures, what we mean by that. All involved actors did give a lot of speeches. The 2 female leaders, Gabriela Grujic as well as Mirjana Kovačković. I myself, when I was in Serbia, I addressed the importance of dual education. We had discussion, debates on panels, as you can see here. And always we were showing up in the television to explain how important dual education is, but also to answer to sometimes nasty questions. And this is an extremely important role of all the leaders to raise a dialogue with the community, with the society, so that dual education gets to this acceptance which is needed. First findings from our evidence. Here it's a very nice picture which showed the success story. We did analyze the actors' satisfaction with its cooperation. And from 2018 to 2022, you see here that this connection between the actors. When I talk about actors, I mean the Minister of Education, the CCIS, the regional school administration, the regional CCIS, the schools itself, and obviously the companies. And these are for us the stakeholders, and we did survey all of them in 4 waves. And that's why we could now create that picture which shows how important the relation has changed over time. In 2021, we have very strong connection between regional CCIS and companies, but also regional CCIS and schools. And also the network from top down, that means from the Ministry of Education, the CCIS, to the regional areas works quite well. And I can tell you this is a big success. I work with about 30 countries around the world, but I haven't seen a process like that within 4 years. This is remarkable. A next result is the school participation, because we need schools and we need companies. What you can see here in the development over time is what kind of percentage of students we have in the different programs. Well, in Serbia, actually, we have a competition between a full-time VET approach and a more company-oriented dual education approach. What you can see from the figures is that the full-time approach is really still very strong. However, the students are not so much anymore exposed to workplace learning. The figures from 30% in 2018 goes down to 80%. The opposite is the case in the dual education, LDE VET students. Here we have the success of 3% up to 29%. And this again is really remarkable, even though some of you may think this is not enough. Yes, it's not enough. We are on the way forward, but it's an extremely important step forward. Now, because companies are so important to improve this dual education, we were asking the president whether he could give us support with a big event. And he decided, end of 2019, to organize a huge event with more than 1,500 companies in a big event hall, where he himself gave a speech, as well as Mr. Čadež, the president of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I myself could explain again the benefits of dual education, and we invited also a guest speaker from Colorado, US, which is working with us in the Center on Economics and Management of Education and Training too, because Colorado has a similar problem as Serbia. However, the state Colorado is not where Serbia is actually. And listening to an entrepreneur from the US who tries to do the same was very inspiring. Now, why is it so important to convince company? Basically, there is an economic theory behind, and it's the most important factor in dual education. Companies want a cost-benefit balanced training, and this is feasible. The Swiss system is a real business case. It's not about social corporate responsibility. It's about creating a net benefit for company. It should pay off the training. How does this work? First of all, the duration of a program is extremely important. At the beginning, when students are fresh and directly coming from the schools, obviously it's a cost factor. The companies need to invest in their training, in their capability. But if the curriculum is rightly done and is a good curriculum, over time, the productivity of a student will, be better, and you have the break-even point where the profit or the return is even higher than the costs. And the main factors are the exposure to real work and the time spent in a company. So unfortunately, our evidence, our analysis of the current cost-benefit situation in the Serbian dual education is not where we would like to be. That means you see here we have net costs. That means the benefit is lower than the costs, and we were asking what is the reason for that. The problem is basically visible in our implementation research study, where you can see here the workplace weekly in-company learning hours from 2018 to 2022. In the law and dual education, we have at the beginning 2.8 hours per week spent in the company, and it goes down for 2021. Well, that has to do with COVID. We had 2020 and 21 are these COVID years, which may have an impact. But even 2.8 hours per week is not enough. I just mentioned the Swiss education amount. In average, 28 hours per week students spend in the company in average. So that means here we have room for improvement, and that's why we are organizing, or the Swiss government helped us to organize a meeting with the president, because actually he needs to approve our proposal for major changes. These changes will then lead to the second phase, and in the second phase we do not only total revision of the law on dual education, but also we need to revise related laws too. And in the second phase, which starts this year, we also will accompany that important process through research again, so a second cost-benefit analysis. And with that, we hope that we lay the ground for a really robust and successful education system, dual education system in Serbia. I would like to thank to all stakeholders, because I can tell you it's such an extreme hard work for all stakeholders involved to create and establish a robust education system. First of all, obviously, the ministers of education. I had the chance to see Mr. Čadež, the president of the CCIS, but also the Minister of Education. Then I had an intensive contact with the Assistant Minister, Gabriela Grujic, and with the Director of Education at the CCIS, Mirjana Kovačević. These are the two ladies, I can tell you, which stays in that process for over 6 years now, and their workload is beyond what you can imagine. So I have a high respect of the work these two ladies all the time are doing, and still are laughing and have fun together. And you can see, if you visit these two ladies, the passion is extremely. And having leaders like these two ladies with their passion, that's the best thing you can have. And therefore I invite the bosses of these two ladies, take care about your leaders. At the end, obviously, I would like to thank the Swiss government for their tremendous support in this way forward, because without the Swiss government, we wouldn't have been here. They financed our research and counseling, but also they were always open with the Swiss embassy and the SDC offices to receive us, to help us with the negotiation between all stakeholders. And I'm looking forward to the phase 2 to collaborate with you again, and to the next events, which hopefully helps to prepare a wonderful dual education for the next generation of talents. Thank you very much for listening.